Okay, we're running through all the teams looking ahead to the 2020 Intercounty Championship. We're going to start, today we're going to look at the Laois hurlers. You know, what's realistic, what do they need, how do they need to do it, do they have the players to do it, and realistically, how far are they going to go this year? So it was a great year for Laois last year. You spoke to Eddie Brennan for a piece for the Irish Independent recently. I suppose you did look back in 2019 with a view to what's realistic in 2020, did you?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. 2019 was great. Totally unexpected. No point in saying it was massively unexpected. They weren't expected to beat Dublin. They would have expected themselves to win the Joe McDonagh, and then everything kind of snowballed after that, beating Dublin, and then putting up a very good performance against Tip with 14 men for the guts of a half, we'll say.
Do you know what? I do look back on that and think, right, brilliant that you went down to 14 men with a harsh red card, and you still came out with a bit of credit. But it was never really realistically a game. It was never really in the melting pot. And then the fact that they're getting clapped off.
Was it ever going to be?
The fact that you're getting clapped off at the end of a game after losing by 10 points. I'd be a little bit like, I'd hope that almost fires you for 2020 to think, it's not good enough to get clapped off by a team that's after baiting us out the gate in third gear.
I agree with you, but you're taking it totally out of context. Where did it come from? They came from nowhere.
I know, but there's a self-respect that this is, we expect far more from ourselves. I fully respect Laois hurling.
Did they though? Before that though, did they? Did they expect more from themselves? They hadn't played in Croke Park ever played in Croke Park before. They hadn't beaten Dublin or anything like that in the championship in a long time. So I think it'd be,
recalibrate your expectations all. Like, I don't think any team should be happy with the idea of getting clapped off by another team that's after beating you in third gear.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but it's all from the base of that won't happen this year. That sort of thing happens once, and then you reassess and you're like, what's our goal next year?
Like, if it's your own fans clapping you off, you're like, fair enough. But I don't know. Like, I'd say if I was Eddie Brennan, who would obviously not be buzzing about Tipperary clapping his team off after, I would say in a way, because Kilkenny, man, the rivalry with Tip, all that kind of stuff, I think I'd be using that as fuel. Lads, you never want to get clapped off by the opposition again, because that's kind of, it's like a pat in the head.
I understand where you're coming from, but yeah, it's all to do with the base. Like, I don't think it's not been clapped off for that result or that performance. It's been clapped off for probably the year as a whole. They probably provided one of the biggest moments of the season. That's what was more to do with. By beating a team that they were probably...
You think that the Tip players clapped off Laois lads because they played well against Dublin?
I'll tell you why they clapped off the Laois lads. Well, they clapped off the Laois lads because if Dublin had won, Dublin would have hopped off Tipperary, and they were like, lads, thanks very much. We're through to the All-Ireland semi-final now. An easier passage. We could have been fodder for Dublin here today. Could have been knocked out of the championship. And in inadvertent ways, they clapped them off because they think we could win All-Ireland now.
So thanks for showing up and taking part. We didn't take you all that seriously, is what you've just basically said.
That's not what... But that's
how it comes across. We're not taking you seriously. My whole thing is Laois wants to make sure that never happens again, that you are taken seriously from here on in.
I agree with you, but you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere, and they started somewhere last year. They're obviously not going to be happy with that next year. Everything is going to be, their goals are going to be totally recalibrated next year. But this was a starting point. This is where it's all about where you're starting from and where you're hoping to get to.
So speaking of which, what is realistic for Laois this year? Okay, right. So they won the Joe McDonagh last year and really impressive along the way.
Yeah, won it very well.
Came out, did very well to beat Dublin. Fantastic performance in Port Laois. I think it was one of those perfect storm days. And they did what they needed to do, playing really classy hurling. Their touch was absolutely brilliant. I was so impressed with their touch. So they're up in division, so next year the league is changed around, so it's 2 groups of 6 teams. Top 2 get into the semi-finals, 1 versus 2, etc., as you'd expect, and then into the final. And then the 2 bottom teams in both sides, Division 1A and 1 Group B, they play in a relegation final. So in Laois's side, you've got Carlow, Dublin, Clare, Laois, Wexford and Kilkenny. So if we're to just take the league in isolation, what's realistic?
I'll tell you, looking at that group, it's not the worst group.
No,
they'll fancy themselves at beating Carlow. They'll fancy a hop off Clare at least. They'll fancy themselves against Dublin, probably unlikely to beat them, but they'll still fancy themselves. Wexford, Kilkenny, they won't see themselves a mile off any of those teams. Realistic league aspirations is to make sure that it's still.
That's actually
and don't end up in a relegation final.
Do you know what?
The two groups are totally distorted.
But you're like, it's a dry run for Leinster.
Essentially, it's a strange one, yeah. And
swap Clare for Galway. And you've got the Leinster.
I noticed that a couple of months ago. And usually it would be the other way around, and you'd have Kilkenny, Waterford, Kilkenny, Limerick teams, games. So basically, essentially, that Group 1B is all games that are going to take place later in the year. And I didn't think, but it's all done on where they finished in the league this year.
This is like after playing, like the Munster Hurling League and Leinster or the Walsh Cup and all that kind of stuff. So teams are just constantly playing. That's a little bit. I think that's a bit ill thought.
They've done it on a rating system. That's the way they did it.
Yeah.
So
right.
It's not great though. No.
So they have a decent chance of survival there.
They would definitely be aiming to make sure that they're not in a relegation fight.
Yeah. So then if we move on into the Leinster Championship, we're going to be talking about Galway, Kilkenny, Dublin, Wexford. This is their first time back into the big time, and the first time where it's the provincial round robin system for them. So this is new territory. Do you think it'll overwhelm them, or do you think they'll give a good account of themselves?
Well, they've Galway and Wexford at home. Realistically, you couldn't see them beating Galway. You'd imagine they'd be a bit closer to Wexford. Maybe I just had that in my head that they'd be a bit closer to Wexford. But Wexford's results against them in Championship in the last 4 or 5 years have been fairly convincing for Wexford. They go to Kilkenny, and that's the one game where obviously Eddie Brennan's going back down to Kilkenny, which should be interesting.
He thought a test of what's in your belly.
Yeah, and he obviously said that the other games are as well also, but he just said that that's really when you'll kind of know what's in a lad's belly. He'd be going down faced off against Brian Cody.
And then Dublin looking for revenge.
Yeah.
For last year.
Not simple at all. If they get any sort of result out of those 4 games, I think, not that they'd be happy, but it would be rated as success or somewhat. They're going to struggle to get a result, I'd imagine. And just the bodies that they're down as well. You've Chad Dwyer, who's one of their best forwards, in my view, and on his day can score 4 or 5 from out around midfield or half forward. Picky Matter, who was drafted into the panel.
Ben Conroy.
Yeah, maybe during the Joe McDonough last year, I think. He might actually. We played against him in a club game. He was playing for Clock Balacalla, and then he was brought in with Laois. Ben Conroy, who by all accounts be one of their kind of forwards to be looking to in the next couple of years. He's gone travelling. You have
in lines to the cruciate. He came on
God.
against Dublin, and I think he won a couple of frees on Chris Crummy, who's obviously one of the best wing backs out there.
He's a good player, and he's a big rangy player. He did his cruciate the first training back. That's an absolute disaster.
And then Mark Kavanagh, he's in a bit of bother and likely to miss the league.
Yeah,
like that's your free taker, as well as someone who can run straight down the centre of a team, and a lovely hurler and user of the ball.
Yeah, they're down a few bodies before they started. The only thing I wouldn't have had massive expectations of them last year either. But they definitely made use of what they had last year. Like not many people knew who Mark Kavanagh was this time last year. Not many people knew who Pádraig Delaney was either, or even Aaron Dunphy to a lesser extent. So I think Eddie seemed happy enough that he had a lot of young talent to work with, and the results at minor and 21 have been better the last 4 or 5 years since their kind of structures were overhauled. But there's lads that are going to have to prove themselves again. He's going to have to get a few more lads to step up. We seem fairly confident that the lads that he had that were 19 and 20, that sort of age, that they were willing to put in the graft to go and test themselves. What better way to test yourself than get with those 2 big games at home and 2 big games away? But they are going to be under pressure.
Kieran McAvoy is back.
He's the only one.
Yeah.
The only one that came back. Which I thought was a bit mad.
How frustrated did Eddie seem about that?
I seem frustrated enough, yeah. I'd say, without being smart, anyone would be the same. You think, all right, we've proved to everybody. We've proved that we've a good setup and that we're going the right way, we're playing the right way. We've proved to the people at least that things are going the right direction. And one lad comes back in, no Camross players back in. It's a bit. Yeah, he said he was frustrated or disappointed to the point of frustration. That's what he said. But he definitely wasn't dwelling on it, which you can't obviously. But it is frustrating. No point in saying any different.
So would it be fair to say that a good season for Laois would be survival, not getting relegated to Division 2A in the league, and getting a positive result of any kind, whether it's a draw or a win in the Leinster Championship, albeit it feels like they should, on balance, get relegated. When they beat Dublin last year, Dublin were down 7 players. People don't talk about that. If Dublin are anyway right, you'd imagine Dublin should atone for that this year. So does it feel like any positive result would be a good year?
Oh God, I would definitely.
And not getting hammered by teams?
Yeah, I would take, to be honest with you, this is just me, I would take something similar to how Carlo did last year.
Go down with pride.
Yeah, and obviously a positive result would be absolutely great. But it's a bit of a disastrous situation, realistically, isn't it? They're going to find it hard to stay up. And they're going to go back down, and then they're going to have to try and get back up. And this is exactly what we thought.
It'll go
what we
16
thought would
Leinster
happen.
soon.
It should. It would make it makes sense for it to. But that's maybe we're being a bit unfair. I don't think we are. I think we're being realistic. To be fair.
Let us know what you think anyway. Leave comments under the video and.